circles of relevance here I'd like to share with you is when we think about balance, I think about mind. First thing, mind. This is kind of relevant for tonight's topic. You know, those things that are the acquisition of knowledge, that continuous learning. Doesn't matter whether you're 17 or 70. You know, the world is a changing place. The velocity of change is accelerating. God knows. I was talking to a friend about cell phone technology the other day, and I remember back in 1990 when I got my first Motorola cell phone, and it was a brick. Anybody have one of those things? It had a battery life of an hour. You know, a phone call, 30-second phone call cost $10. The things you kids take for granted now. Of course, you know, so with the velocity of change and the velocity of technology, this constant acquisition of knowledge and the search for information on the digital superhighways is clearly really important. The second circle I think that's important is, of course, body, right? Healthy mind and a healthy body. And you kids, you crazy kids are getting to embark on a college, and you're going to have to make some healthy choices, all right? Some of the things that you could choose to do, I don't want to know about. Your parents probably don't want to know about. And if you can't talk to your parents about them, you probably shouldn't be doing them. But I'll leave it to the fact that you should start today, not when you're 50, trying to figure out how to make relevant lifestyle choices in terms of keeping yourself healthy. And this will become more relevant toward the end of our conversation tonight. The third circle, under balance, of course, is soul. And again, you know, we can look at this in a number of different ways. We could think of it as something spiritual, right? Or maybe it's that search for God or love. But I think for purposes of tonight's conversation, I think what I'd like to discern this is simply a search for truth. Okay, and we had a conversation about knowledge to get us started, and I think probably the first message I would give you in terms of this continuous seeking of knowledge is searching for truth, because there's a lot of untruth out there. There's a 24-hour news cycle filled with opinions on the left and on the right, and up and down and sideways. I find it all very confusing, but certainly keeping ourselves balanced, healthy mind, healthy body, and a healthy soul, we can't forget that spiritual aspect. We can't forget that aspect which is beyond the physical or beyond the intellectual. And again, I think if we can find this spot in the center, this is where I try to gravitate in my life. What I find here is something that we call wisdom. Wisdom, you know, this ability, this inner voice that you might have to discern truth, this humility, this virtue of humility that you might find that tells you you don't know everything. Yes, you're 18 years old, you've learned a lot, you've acquired a lot of knowledge. You're going to acquire a lot more, whether that's in university, whether it's in job experience, whether it's doing something, you know, in Haiti on a mission trip. Your life experiences will form you, and they will change you in profound ways which you can't anticipate now, so don't even try. That's not what it's all about right now. Right now it's the curiosity time for you. But keep in mind, as you try to find balance in here, you will find wisdom, and in wisdom you will be able to discern truth. So when I think about, you know, who are some great role models for you, some great role models who had humility, who were well balanced, and of course I'm putting this together and trying to figure out, well, who do I know that's a great leader that you might have heard of? And so the first guy I thought of was this fellow by the name of Jesus Christ. I think he's a pretty good leader. Now, I'm not going to sit here and try to convert you that he's the living Son of God or that there is a God. I'm not going to try to tell you he's the fulfillment of the Messianic covenant. What I am going to tell you, though, is he was a transformational leader, a guy from an obscure city, Nazareth, a guy from a humble background, carpenter's boy. And yet today, 2,000 years later, we have 1.5 billion people who fundamentally believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. That's transformational. And how did he do that? He did it with a message of love, and he certainly did it with a tremendous amount of humility. And so these are great qualities, and I think we can look to figures like Jesus. How about somebody more contemporary? How about a Gandhi? Another obscure guy, not from a wealthy family, a lawyer, by training, so good can come from that vocation. But here's a guy who saw an incredible amount of injustice. His vision was a subcontinent of India that was no longer under the thumb of the British Empire. Who could have imagined at this point in time in the world when the sun never set on the British Empire that someone could have such an ostentatious dream, such an outrageous vision of social change, and yet a single person did that, made that dream come true. How about somebody even more contemporary? About Martin Luther King. We all know Martin Luther King. We celebrate a holiday for Martin Luther King. Simple message of social justice, of equality. Is a guy who was born in Florida in 1960, who was raised in an era of segregation and an era of desegregation. I sort of lived the Martin Luther King dream, and I can assure you this is a better place, a better country, a better world for his outrageous dream of believing that color or religion or even social status should not define who we are, and it certainly shouldn't define how we perceive other people. So again, three great leaders, all pointing us in a world of humility, balance, truth-seeking, and I believe wisdom. So, my next set of circles, and this is mainly driven for you high school seniors, I would tell you is what I think of as discernment. Now, discernment in the business world is certainly important. I mean, we see lots of opportunities, we face lots of change, we face lots of struggles. The Great Recession of 2008 certainly had a big impact on our business, and obviously we can't simply move like a ping pong ball bouncing from crisis to crisis or opportunity to opportunity. We really have to think long and hard about how we want to invest our capital. And we want to think long and hard about how we invest our time, our management bandwidth. So discernment is, I think, a really important tool of life skills that you're going to have to master. But when I think of discernment, I'm going to present it to you more futuristically. So the first thing in discernment I think of is passion. Now, we've heard some conversation about passion in the previous conversations. We've heard talk about passion as a byproduct of love, and it certainly can be. We've heard about passion in terms of, as I'm referencing today, as something that you really feel strongly about, something that you feel connected about. We heard a conversation about excellence and exceptional excellence. And that's the kind of passion I'm talking about. And as you've heard from other speakers, everybody can be passionate about something. Maybe you haven't discovered it yet, but be patient. It's going to happen. It'll happen for you if you let it. But as you're preparing yourself, and if I could actually see your hands, I'd usually ask for a show of hands. I mean, how many people who are headed to college? Anybody out there? Several hands. How many of you actually know what you want to do? You've decided. How many of you haven't? You're kidding me, really? You and me, man. I was you. I had no idea when I was 17 years old graduating from high school. I didn't know whether I was going to college or not. In fact, I didn't. I spent a couple of years working, mainly because I had to, in order to pay for it. But I had no earthly idea what I wanted to do. And I think those early work experiences that I was able to enjoy were certainly formative to me. But this idea of being passionate about something and pursuing that with a vengeance, I think, is really important to your success. And of course, you know the cliche, which is if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. And it's absolutely, positively true. My next circle would be to tell you to find something that's socially relevant. Socially relevant. That's a toughie, okay? But the world has a lot of needs. Our communities have a lot of needs, and we're all members of this community. We think of ourselves as one body. We all can't be, hands and feet. Some have to be heads, and some have to be toes and fingers. But we're part of a larger organism on planet Earth, and we have to have some understanding that the world actually doesn't revolve around me. I used to think that it did, but I realize it doesn't now, although I wish it would. This last one, and this is going to be a little bit controversial, I think, but I'm a capitalist, so I have to put this up here. I think the last thing is financially rewarding. Now, that's not altruistic, but bear with me a second here. Financially rewarding. And again, this little zone here, and look, let's just be clear. There's nothing wrong with making a buck, right? Okay? There's nothing wrong with profit. It's not a four-letter word. It's what creates jobs. You know, the acquisition of wealth drives innovation. These are true, unfortunately. In a capitalist world, we've had a lot of benefits from that progress. This area here, though, where they all come together, I'm passionate about it. What I want to do is socially relevant, and I can actually do something that's financially rewarding or sustaining to me. This is transformational. You know, that's where innovation occurs. That's where I encourage you to strive. Find this place where you can be passionate. Maybe it's writing, okay? Maybe it's teaching. Maybe it's forming other people's minds. Now, I know you teachers might say, well, that financially rewarding thing isn't working for you. Okay? It's all relative, and we are grateful to have you. Okay? It's certainly socially relevant. And as we heard in one of the previous conversations, a place where we need to be revolutionary, not evolutionary. But this idea that we can find a place where we're passionate, we can find something that's socially relevant and financially rewarding, creates innovation and transformation. So how about a few examples that would be relevant to you today? So first guy that came to mind as I was actually putting this together about 6 hours ago was Bill Gates. We all know about Bill Gates. Certainly a wealthy guy, right? Yes, we still use Microsoft Office products. You guys probably use Macs. But this guy, you know, college dropout, decided he wanted to go, you know, not run away from home, but certainly leave home without his parents' permission to do programming at the local university. The guy was passionate about programming, ultimately created an operating system that we now know as Microsoft. It was certainly socially relevant. I mean, he literally changed the way we do work today. He increased our collective productivity, leaps and bounds. He created the ability to collaborate at work in ways we hadn't perceived before, and it was certainly financially rewarding. I'd say Bill Gates was a transformational figure. Who else? Well, we can't not have Bill Gates and not talk about Steve Jobs. And I'm sure most of you are younger folks or who don't wear watches do have iPhones or something similar, as do my teenagers. Steve Jobs certainly was passionate about design. I mean, the guy was a visionary, and he was a design savant. Not necessarily a good business guy, though, so one of the things we learned about Steve Jobs is after several years at Apple, and I'm actually one of the first Apple users, the first company when I graduated from university and went to work, we actually used what they referred to, not as a laptop, but a portable personal computer. These things were gigantic. They were anything but elegant, and they weren't particularly powerful, but it changed the way we did work, and it was certainly socially relevant, and ultimately became financially rewarding for Steve Jobs. But keep in mind, he got fired from Apple. He was so focused on design, his company was about to go bankrupt. Enter a fellow by the name of John Sculley. This is a guy who I actually know. John Sculley in 1985 takes over Apple. And I don't know whether this stuff was deep in the bowels of the Apple research department, you know, their R&D, or if it was a John Sculley vision, and the two biographies will conflict on whose idea it was. But Sculley actually puts out a video, which would be cool if I could have found it and showed it to you, of what I can only categorize today as Siri of 1985. He puts together a video that talks about how Apple is going to change the way we live and work. I mean, can you get any more transformational than that? Can you get any more aspirational than that? We're going to change the way you live and work. And he proceeded to then create what's clearly back then a sci-fi video, but he starts talking into the air. And I'll just use Siri since we all know her name. You know, Siri, what's the weather like outside? And Siri would respond. Siri, tell me what's on my calendar today. And Siri would respond. Siri, I have a conflict. I need you to change my calendar. I need to get the refrigerator repairman out to see the fridge. Yes, sir. You know, so Siri was going to change the way the world worked. Now it's 1985. We're not quite there yet, But it's amazing for me in my lifetime to actually see how these changes have evolved from some person's vision, some person's aspiration, to something that really is transforming how we live and work today. So those dreams, whether it's a dream of Martin Luther King or it's a dream of a Steve Jobs, Jack Skelly, who knows? But these are the dreams that I hope and pray you will have as you prepare to move on into your next chapter of your life. Let me I've got some slides. So I didn't think it would actually be particularly relevant to give you my work experience philosophy without actually giving you a little bit of a challenge. And since we have 15 interns working for us this summer, I decided to put them to work and do some data mining for me. So here's I picked the 4 best slides out of about 12 different topics I gave them to research. So I take credit for none of the data here. But I'm going to give you four nuggets to think about tonight, maybe think about for the next 50 years. First graph you have up here is a trend line on world population and something I'm keenly inspired to, which is an average male lifespan. The blue line represents good news for us guys. We're living longer. Hooray. The red line is, I guess, good news. There are more of us, and in not too distant future, soon to be over 8 billion of us. So when we think about something that you can be passionate about, something that is definitely going to be socially relevant, and something that I think might be financially rewarding, think about what are the basic needs that this population group is going to require. Well, at a baseline, we all need food, clean drinking water, reasonably predictable energy supply, I would say health care, right? And one might also think the potential for conflict exists in here as we start talking about scarce resources. Do I have to do this myself now? I do. Okay. My next chart for you, carbon footprint. Again, I'm not Al Gore, okay? I'm not a climate change scientist. Yeah, but some of the facts are kind of relevant, I think. I can only chart this stuff back to 1960. Frankly, anything before that predates me and probably didn't really exist. So I go back to 1960 and I see the fact that our carbon footprint has increased by over 1/3. So what? I'm not exactly sure what to make out of that. What's more relevant to me on this graph, I can't get off the red carpet or Sarah will pull me back, is the blue line. I'm in the airline business, if you didn't know that. And in the airline business, we consume a lot of gas, getting you folks to your vacation destinations. And that blue line is the cost of fuel over the last 50 years. And you see it was pretty benign for a while. You got a little price spike for those of us who lived through the Arab oil embargo in the mid-1970s. But it has been climbing off the charts. It's relevant to you because your teenagers drive your cars and it costs you $4 a gallon of gas to get them to all the places they'd like to go. So it's a scarce resource. It's potentially harmful to our planet, and it's crowding out our ability to invest in other areas of our economy. So what are we going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? You better come up with some solutions, because this isn't sustainable. This is our oil consumption on the right side of the pie chart, the graph, and it's grown at about 1 million barrels per day, per year. So today we consume about 88 million barrels of oil every day. I can barely even fathom 88 million barrels of oil a day. Next year it'll be 89. The year after that it'll be 90. The year after that it'll be 92. Okay? Hence, what are we doing? We're tearing up the landscape, looking for shale oil and gas, and we're hydrofracking, which gets me to my next chart for your consideration. Water. Water consumption. Take it for granted today, but we are consuming trillions of kilometers of water. And for population growth, it actually trends nicely. If we ran a regression analysis on that, we'd have a high R² for you math whizzes, in the correlation between human population and water consumption. Meanwhile, our forests are being reduced. I don't know whether that's an alarming rate or not. I'm not a forest guy. But what it tells me is, again, we need to clear land in order to create resources to invest in agriculture, to feed potentially 9 billion people. But those red dots up there, those trees, they're actually one of our most effective carbon scrubbers, right? So when we take the carbon scrubbing things, it also produce this thing called oxygen for you chemistry guys. And that's sort of relevant for the potential 9 billion people on the planet. So, again, I don't know how you guys are going to fix this, but it seems like there's an opportunity to do something that you could be passionate about, socially relevant and financially rewarding, built around this premise. And then finally, my gift to you, my generation's gift to you. And now don't thank me. Don't thank us for this, all of us taxpayers, for leaving you a $16 trillion national debt. I can't comprehend that one either. I can actually wrap my head around 88 million barrels of oil consumed today than I can a $16 trillion debt. But when we think about being passionate about something, doing things that are socially relevant and financially rewarding, generally you have to attract capital to finance those sorts of things. And when our bad spending habits crowd out our ability to actually finance products or projects, then again we get to conflict. So one of the, I think it was actually Sarah was telling me she might be interested in being a diplomat. Good career move, Sarah, because I think we're going to need lots of potential diplomats, lots of potential opportunities here, lots of potential problems. You guys have a lot to get busy on. So with that, I will end with a story, because you just have to end with a story, right? This is a life experience story, so pay attention. Thousands of years ago, there was a old man and his grandson who lived with them, and they were farmers. And it was time to go get the seed, so they had to walk into town to get the seed. No problem. Grandfather tells the boy to go fetch the donkey, tether him up, and let's drag him to town and get some seed so we can plant the crops. So the old man and his grandson are walking down. Little boy's got the donkey trailing behind him, and here comes some travelers in the opposite direction. And the traveler says, well, that's the dumbest thing I've ever seen. You guys are walking and you got a perfectly good donkey. Somebody ought to be riding that donkey. They looked at each other and thought, that's actually a pretty good idea. And so the grandfather hoists the grandson on the donkey, and off they go. Not too far down the road, they come across another group of travelers. And they're like, that is obscene. I can't believe you healthy little whippersnapper riding on that donkey while your dear old grandfather is forced to walk this long distance to town. And the boy thought that is disrespectful, and so he got off the donkey, and his grandfather quickly climbed up. And they continue on their journey, and not too soon they find another set of travelers come in the opposite direction who just thought that was the worst, most despicable thing going. You're making your grandson walk while you, perfectly healthy grandfather, sitting on that nice donkey. This is just outrageous. They were really confused at this point because they had tried nobody on the donkey, the grandson on the donkey, the grandfather on the donkey, what to do. So they decided the only logical thing would be for both of them to get on the donkey. And so that seemed to satisfy everybody. And they're heading off to town, getting a little bit closer, and they passed some more travelers. And these travelers were outraged, completely indignant. Can't you see, you lazy people, this beast of burden is laboring under the weight of two people? This is unbelievable. And I looked in the cell saying, that doesn't, poor donkey's not doing so good, and we really need him. So, gosh, nobody on the donkey, grandson on the donkey, grandfather on the donkey, both of them on the donkey, what to do? They had that aha moment. I know, the grandfather says, we will carry the donkey. And so they pick up the donkey, and they're laboring to get him to town. And the donkey's kind of enjoying it, but they're crossing this narrow bridge, and the boy stumbles, and the grandfather can't take all the weight, and whoof, over the side goes the donkey. And the moral of the story is, if you try to please everybody, you can kiss your donkey goodbye. Thank you very much.